Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Thursday. I actually can't believe it's Thursday already. It feels like this week has been both simultaneously incredibly slow and been kind of flying past. Maybe because there's so much news, but also I feel like I've been really busy. Kind of interesting. One of the things we're doing in the background, this Sunday's conversation, the sit down, is going to be with Stuart Rhodes, who is the founder of the Oath Keepers. I talked to him for, like almost 5 hours. And don't worry, that's not how long the podcast is going to be. It's like 3 and change. But I think I've spent something like 10 hours talking to J6ers in the past maybe 48 hours or so, like a lot of time. And weirdly enough, because it was brought up in the chat earlier by B, we haven't heard anything about Julie Kelly from those people. They haven't gotten any benefits from her. It's kind of interesting. I had people ask me if I could get in touch with Dan Bongino, and I said no, couldn't. So all of that stuff is kind of interesting. It's just kind of like a revisiting of a lot of these open wounds. And I want you guys just to keep it in your mind that just because Donald Trump is in office, just because some of these pardons have gone down, doesn't mean there's not still people suffering. And there are really people who are deeply, deeply suffering. It is a weight that I'm carrying from yesterday, having talked to Joe Biggs. So those are some of the things that are going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks on the podcast. The Sunday sit down is going to be interviews with J6ers again. You guys, I think, will be informed. I think you'll be a little bit wounded by some of the things, the vulnerability and the difficult lives that these men are now carrying on. And once you understand again the injustice that has gone on in this country, it will help you feel both better and worse about where we are right now. Because even though we're moving forward, there's a lot of stuff that's happening that's beneficial. There's still an awful lot of evil that's out there. And Donald Trump and the administration have a lot of their work cut out for them. And we're not seeing anything except obstructionism from the political left. I just keep seeing it. Apparently, it's the fault of white supremacy, which we're going to cover deeply on today. JD Vance is over in Europe right now. I'm corrected yesterday from one of you in the DMs that I get that apparently that video of Pete Hegseth working out with 10th Group Special Forces was actually over in Germany. That makes a lot of sense because that's what he was over doing. Big focus on NATO. Big focus on American spending. And predictably, the political left is melting down that Donald Trump has reached out to Vladimir Putin. Apparently, they were all in favor of ending the war as long as the war ended with Ukraine winning everything that they think and that the grift would continue to go on and the scam of the American people would continue. And if anything else happens, if any sort of like financial conservatism happens or a mutually beneficial solution, Russia brought in from the cold, if their Cold War enemy is not, sort of acknowledged as the ongoing boogeyman, then the political left is not interested in ending the war in Ukraine, no matter how many people died. So that's going to be a focus of what we got going on today. We got a ton of topics, and I'm leading into it a little bit early. So there we go. Before we get started, let's go ahead and say thanks to the folks over at the Wellness Company because, man, the worst thing is it's just gotten cold here. We're getting winter for the first day, which means maybe there'll be like a real flu season. Everybody around my family has been sick. You guys know what that's like. Nobody likes being sick. About the only thing worse than feeling sick is having to go to a doctor and sitting in a waiting room and waiting for a prescription somewhere, having to make those decisions whether or not you're sick enough to go. It's nice being an adult when you can make your own decisions in advance. TWC.health/Kyle is a way that you can limit one of the worst things about feeling terrible, which is going and doing errands to make yourself feel better. Like you, my time is valuable. I don't want to take downtime when I should be resting to go out and run to a pharmacy or run to a grocery store or a Walmart, sit in a waiting room and wait for someone to text my name or call it on the loudspeaker saying we're ready to send you home so you can actually start getting better. Prepare or repair are the options you have in life. If you guys want to go ahead and do the prepare option, you can look at the emergency medical kits from twc.health/Kyle. It's the first thing you'll see on the landing page. Check them out. You can also look into the contagion emergency kit if you want something that's going to be a little bit more airway focused. If you want a nebulizer with some corticosteroids so you can open up your airway and breathe better. Those two options are easy solutions. They have prescription medications like ivermectin, a generic Z-Pak, which can handle a lot of different infections, amoxicillin, which I've used as well very recently in the last maybe 6 months. Super useful to have something like that. They've also got a guidebook on how you decide. What are the indications? What are the things that you're supposed to use it for? How do you do this with normal use? It takes a 2-minute form. You fill it out, you send it off with your order, and then your kit is going to arrive by mail. Again, this is for U.S. customers only. Again, the website is twc.health/Kyle. Look in the show description. You will find it, and I'll pin a comment over on the Rumble channel when we do it. Let's go ahead and get into all this stuff because we got a lot of stuff to cover today. So I'm a little bit hyped. You can tell the hair is a little bit wild. I got out of bed later than normal. I started about an hour behind my normal schedule, which is usually before 6 a.m. And maybe that's why I have the energy and I feel like it's kind of like a hyped up time. We're moving a little bit quicker. But yeah, I think there's a lot to get into. And one of them is something we talked about yesterday. This is an interesting little blurb from the New York Post, and it was written as an op-ed by Jonathan Turley. It's the constitutional crisis that we talked about yesterday. For some reason, Democrats decided that that's where they're going to land. They're going to call what is happening under the Trump administration a constitutional crisis. And so that's the talking point that was picked up. We got to see it. There was that little Pink Floyd song that I couldn't get rid of in the background. And it was a compilation of multiple Democrats at various different levels crying about the credibility of the Trump administration under a constitutional crisis. But in reality, what they're doing is they're just shredding their own. So Jonathan Turley is an attorney, and you often see him over on Fox and some other stuff. He's been out there talking about it. He brings up the idea of jumping the shark, which is a reference to Happy Days, something that makes sense that some of you have been hearing in our little hold music that we have over on the Rumble channel. When you listen to it, it's kind of like a surf rock, and it kind of throws you back to maybe like a Happy Days type of an attitude. The jump the shark is when things got too ridiculous, and so the Fonz was going to jump a live shark on water skis, and so that expression was picked up as sort of a you've gone too far. You've done all the things possible, and now you've entered into the area of the ridiculous. And in declaring a constitutional crisis for the president of the United States, the chief executive, doing things that the executive is allowed to do, we have basically entered into the jump the shark era because suddenly they care about the Constitution, although it doesn't seem like they've ever read it. And suddenly they care about limiting the executive, which was not the case for at least 12 of the last 16 years. But in reality, they've been trying to elevate the position of the executive for as long as I've been alive. It seems like human beings in general, they just want a king. And that is a concept that we share on this podcast on a regular basis, the sort of idolatry of the human condition. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how chaste and how devout you are. You want someone to fix your problems. Most people do. They want someone else to pick up the burden and say, I got this for you. Now, there's a small number of people, and I was talking to George Hill yesterday because he and I shared this situation. I don't want anyone to pick up my burdens. I found out the other day that my wife had ordered one of those flat pack pieces of furniture. It's like a rolling cart, and she was going to use it for school stuff for the kids. And when I came down, she'd already assembled it. And little to her, I think I said it to her out loud. And it's one of those things that it doesn't wear on me. But that's my job. Like, my job is to build the things. My job is to do the things that are within my purview. Most people would be happy to find that somebody else did their work for them. Not me, and not some of us, a very small number of us. This human instinct to allow the outsourcing. It's like, well, someone else has got this problem. Thank God. That's very common. And it seems even more common on people on the political left who don't actually have a lot of the hard skills. You don't find now, I think today, in the era of a Donald Trump, you don't find as many people in the blue collar professions that are saying like, oh yeah, the Democrats really represent my position, as they call out things like the world is surrounded by white supremacy, which you don't really see. You just don't. As you see them complaining for reparations, I got a video for you that's going to talk about that later. As you see them taking billions and sometimes trillions of your taxpayer dollars and just sending it to like strangers, to other countries, to people that you can't even fathom helping. It's not because you're not a compassionate person if you don't want to see the rest of the world take all of your tax dollars and grab it up. It's because you think that maybe we should solve the problems for the people that we know first. Each one of us, I assure you, every single one that is listening to this podcast, every single one of you out there, those in the live chat, those who are listening in the replay, you all know somebody who is suffering and having a hard time in this country right now. Somebody who is looking down the barrel of not being able to meet a bill. They're not able to maybe buy groceries and also pay the insurance on their vehicle. That has a car payment that is out of whack. And many of those things may be their own personal decisions, which you could disagree with. But you can't help feel a little bit more empathy as an American, as a fellow citizen of this country, that the tax burden that we have is going to help things that are completely absurd. And Doge has been exposing that in a way that I don't think anybody has been aware of, at least not in my lifetime. We all had this sense, especially if you follow people like Rand Paul, and he would get up and he would read the absurd things. We've been studying apparently the United States is spending money on the cocaine habits of gerbils. And you're like, what the F? The cocaine habits of what? And then you find out, you'd be like, they're looking into the mating rituals and whether or not like certain types of music will cause parrots to breed quicker. And you're like, how are you taking my money and doing that? Like that comes out of my paycheck, especially right now that I work for me. I write a check. I stroke out a check to the federal government for 5 figures. And I have other things that I would use with that. And it wouldn't be like fueling cocaine orgies for gerbils or trying to play Marvin Gaye to parrots. But like that's the kind of stuff we spend money on. And so we're all kind of getting this. There's some pretty good comedy coming out of it as well. There's a guy named Seamus who I met over on the Timcast program one time, and he makes this thing called Freedom Tunes. And so here is a joke version of the things that Elon Musk and his team are discovering that the federal government has been paying for, a lot of it through USAID, and sort of the meltdown that the libs have been getting into. This is the constitutional crisis that suddenly Donald Trump is going like, okay, we're not going to do that. What you're hearing the left say is that we didn't elect Elon Musk. It's like, no, you didn't. That's correct. America elected Donald Trump. And Donald Trump said, hey, I'm going to tap my friend Elon, who we had a funny little bit from Joe Rogan on the other day, talking about how he's basically like this billionaire who's been effed with too much. And Elon's like, okay, well, I've got the capability of finding out what this is about. I can source up a bunch of autistic psychopaths who are going to go through and run line by line through the budget and find out where all the shenanigans are. Again, we say shenanigans here instead of the word effery, which I would normally say if you were talking to me in person. So here's some Freedom Tunes. This is a joke version that sounds so close to real. This could be real. This could be the actual script, and I'll show you some of that in a little bit. Let's start with the joke version of it. Again, Freedom Tunes. Worth a follow if you don't have it already on your list.
Okay, people, we've discovered some incredible abuses of the budget. I mean, really, where are you getting off with these insane expenditures? $10 million spent on body positivity for Haitians in captivity, $8 million on glitter bombs for Saudi Arabian imams, and $9 million on chocolate fondue for East Ukrainian Hebrews.
They have just as much a right to chocolate fondue as anyone, you Nazi!
Well, I'm sorry, but it has to be cut.
No! If you cut $10 million from the CFEUH budget, what's next? Cutting our $3 million budget to give free McFlurries to Pakistani furries?
Well, now that you bring it up...
Oh, come on!
Oh, wow. That's yeah, no, we're definitely cutting that.
This is insanity. You're letting our budget get cut by literal babies.
Because even an infant can balance these books better than you. I mean, come on, people. Come on. 50 million taxpayer dollars for Kool-Aid water fountains for North Korean accountants. Abortion on demand for pandas in Japan. 1,000 packs of Smarties for Iraqi slumber parties.
If you touch any of the Iraqi slumber party budgets, I will shoot you myself.
I'm sorry, but it has to go.
This is clearly a slippery slope to canceling our program to destigmatize marijuana for Latinx folks in Uganda.
Your budget.
It goes on and on. There's like 5 minutes of this stuff. I could sit and listen to it over and over again, mostly because of the rhymes. And you would start wondering, like, is that how they came up with this stuff? Did they just rhyme it out and say, well, yeah, that's what it's going to be. It's going to just be rhyming ridiculousness that we are going to throw all of our money. And of course, they're upset suddenly that it's teenagers. I'm going to reiterate my point because some of you may have to use this in a discussion, a friendly discussion with one of your neighbors. The left is more than happy to say that young people are hyper capable of deciding all kinds of incredible things right up until the point when it doesn't agree with their agenda. How crazy? To the point where they think that a 1.5-year-old might be able to choose their own gender and would be able to opt in to life-altering surgeries and or hormone therapies. Right? I have a 1.5-year-old right now. Today, she was highly amused because she found a little piece of plastic that if she blew through it, it made a whistle noise. And at the same time, she also wanted to give Dad a kiss before he started his podcast. So I got a kiss from her with a piece of plastic in her mouth, which she promptly spit out and then was confused on where the hell it went. That kind of thing lets you know that 1.5-year-olds don't even know what's happening around their own body, let alone being able to make lifelong decisions, right? And so they're mad that like a teenager, like a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old, God forbid, should suddenly be able to do it. These are the parties of credentialism. They want to say that a degree means something, and I'm going to get into that in just a second because we got some pretty funny stuff about DEI. But I'm going to cut into some of the news story here. This is an article from MSNBC, and I'll show you why it's interesting. Again, meta-analysis is the thing that I'm most interested in. It's not just who's saying what, but who are these people in a context that is much broader, not just the article that they wrote. This article is an opinion piece again. It says Trump's firing of a top ethics official is a targeted attack on public trust. I want you to just consider, do you consider Donald Trump firing people in the government? And this person is the director of the Office of Government Ethics, also known as OGE. The Office of Government Ethics, according to the writer of this article, was created in the wake of the Watergate scandal to ensure an independent arbiter was there to promote ethical compliance and prevent conflict of interest from undermining government efficiency and public trust. Do you have a lot of belief in government efficiency? The answer for everybody listening, I will just answer for you. The answer is no. Do you believe that there is a lot of public trust in the federal government? Well, if it turns out that you are on the political right, the odds are highly, highly unlikely, because there is no evidence that the government is deserving of your trust. Now, it's very interesting to me to see who wrote this piece, because it's far more interesting than the positions they take, which is that you shouldn't fire people because they worked in the government, because government people are inherently trustworthy if they have the title Director of the Office of Government Ethics, which to me sounds like the least trustworthy person, because I've seen the results, and the results is that the government is not trustworthy. The person who wrote it is Donald K. Sherman. And Donald, I'm assuming his gender here, is the executive director and chief counsel for a group called Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. And that seems like people who would be interested in government ethics, doesn't it? Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. It stands for a thing called CREW. Now, if only we could remember where we'd heard that before. What is CREW? And where do they... Oh, we remember CREW because CREW was the organization that sued to remove Donald Trump from the ballot in multiple different states, and they were fundraising on it, and we've talked about it here. Even more interestingly, CREW, as far as I can tell, was an organization created by a guy named Norm Eisen. You remember Norm Eisen? There's a couple things about Norm Eisen that are really interesting. Number one, he's so ethical and he's so interested in responsibility that he was the government's representative, the Democrats' representative in the first impeachment of Donald Trump. Oh, so that was totally not partisan. It was a losing battle, by the way, right? And also, CREW is known for something else that's pretty interesting. They currently have that guy, Norm Eisen, who stepped down. He'd stepped down in like 2019, I want to say. CREW was founded by the guy who is now representing the FBI Agents Association, trying to keep probationary agents from being fired and trying to keep all of the people involved in the FBI from being held accountable for all of the actions that the FBI has engaged in for quite a while now. It seems unlikely to me that you could act like you're a nonpartisan agency when the most partisan of agencies are out there advocating for you. If I were somebody working for the Office of Government Accountability or the Office of Government Ethics, I really wouldn't want some group like Crew writing op-eds to defend me. It seemed problematic. The fact of the matter is the people on the left right now, they don't actually believe that this election is supposed to mean something. They actually have this inherent belief that you're supposed to do the same thing we were told throughout the COVID pandemic, which is trust the experts. The argument that the American people seem to have bought in the election of Donald Trump is that there is, in fact, a thing that we like to call the deep state, but more accurately, and you hear it over here a lot, it's the administrative state. The administrative state is all about credentialism. They are about, look at these certificates, look at these degrees on the wall, look at the things and the experience that I have, look at my resume, don't look at my actions, don't look at the results, don't look at the fruits of my labor. Simply look at what I have achieved on paper that I can write down. The FBI actually has an expression, if it's not written, it didn't happen, which is why it's really dangerous that they don't videotape and audio tape all interviews. That was not the way that I did business. But it is the way that a lot of people do business because whatever they write, they consider to be sacrosanct. And they use words that surround and touch on these concepts of holiness or things that cannot be questioned, that are only really meant for the divine because they actually have this ongoing belief that there's a sort of quasi-divinity associated with the government in big letters. The funniest thing is that we tell it here, and it's worth knowing, when we say the government, in America, like not just me, not just you, not just people listening to the podcast, but if you hear the words the government, you are almost exclusively talking about a thing called the executive branch, which is run by the president, who should have essentially almost unlimited power on how to execute the mission of the various things under the executive branch. That's the way that it's been set up. Do I think the government should be that good? No. Do I think we should have as much of it as we do? Absolutely not. But it's amazing that the minute that they lose, it's a constitutional crisis, it's white supremacy, and they don't actually know what they're doing. We now need to trust the experts in that unelected, non-constitutional, unbackstopped fourth branch of government. And here is Scott Jennings kind of honing in on that point on CNN. So I want you to hear it. The person that he's talking to is a guy named Nick Ackerman, who is one of the Watergate attorneys, apparently, and he's out there as their legal consultation. But he defaults to the same thing that a lot of squishy Republicans do, which is what I keep calling the status quo. The status quo is, let's just keep doing what we've been doing. Let's just lose slowly. That's what Republicans do. And what we're seeing right now with the trimming and having an Elon Musk go in and overwhelming the speed of government, for the first time, they're on the back foot and they don't know what to do because the status quo is being irrevocably changed. It's fun to watch for most of us because we don't care about the destruction of it because the federal government doesn't actually do very much in your daily life. I'm going to show you some people who think that it actually is meant to defend them if they're transgender, which is hilariously weird. And kind of an argument in favor of mental institutions. But here's Scott Jennings sort of dismantling this argument.
Here's what I think is a joke. That you have these partisan hack Democrat attorney generals. They get together, and the only thing they know how to do is try to nullify the results of the last election by venue shopping these district court judges. They find the most lunatic liberals they can. They file lawsuits knowing full well they're going to try to usurp the president's authority, tie this up in court for years.
That stuff is sacrosanct. And you've got people going in there who don't know anything about that system.
But these are also just restraining orders.
Doing this.
They're
he knows
asking
nothing about it.
What you just said is so profound. You said these people don't know anything and they don't know what they're doing.
That's right.
But they're appointees.
About Elon Musk.
I understand. But they are appointees of the duly elected president. So your view, you're here as our legal expert, but your view is because you don't personally believe they know enough that the duly elected president, who appointed a Treasury Secretary and who appoints special appointees like Elon Musk, shouldn't be able to act as the president because you don't personally believe they know enough?
Well, they
is
certainly
that how it works?
No.
Or do elections mean anything to you?
Well, it's got nothing to do with elections.
Of course it does. He's doing
the fact
exactly
of the
what
matter
we
is,
the truth was
there
told
is a
tonight.
law.
The truth was told.
Hold on.
The truth was actually told right there. Yeah, it has nothing to do with elections because we think that what we know is better. This is a terrible argument for the people that have been out there campaigning on the idea of democracy. Should not the people's will actually go somewhere? Should it actually not have some weight? And the answer to them is no, they don't think so. So before we get deeper into this, and I've got some fun examples, I've got another op-ed that I want to read because 3 op-eds is probably my maximum limit, but it also says something quite funny. Imagine crying about being a DEI hire or being called a DEI hire when you legitimately worked as a DEI hire. Just saying. This is the level of being out of touch with reality that we're dealing with. And it's fun to watch. And like I said, it's so easy to debunk this stuff because I read this article. I immediately searched this woman's name, found videos, and the first thing I found was the video I'm going to play you. So you guys will get a kick out of that. Before we get into that, again, just because there's an election doesn't mean it's a win, right? If you guys want to think about this, just because the election is won doesn't mean that the fight to restore the nation has been won as well. It is only beginning, and now's the time you can take a stand. You could do so with your wallet. You can do so when you consider your mobile service. If you're paying for people that advocate against you, that's probably a terrible move. Patriot Mobile is leading the charge right now as America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They offer a way that you can vote with your wallet by choosing no compromise, and you don't have to lose any convenience. If you have cell phone service right now in America, you can get cell phone service with Patriot Mobile. This is a call to action to defend your rights and your freedoms. Put your money where your mouth is. You can get outstanding nationwide coverage because they operate on all 3 major networks. And they have U.S.-based tech support, which is a nice thing. The difference is when you spend money with Patriot Mobile, you're going to be supporting the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, the sanctity of life, which is a big deal for this program. You're going to back up veterans and first responders, and it's really easy to switch. You can keep the number, you can keep your phone if you like them, or you could be like my wife where we start talking about, hey, how many generations back are we on that iPhone? Is it time to swap them up? You can upgrade them if you'd like, and they have a 100% US-based customer service team, which is useful when you have to call them up. Right now, go to patriotmobile.com/KSS. Again, my promo code over there is KSS. It's the only one. We have a different one. There's some other Kyle out there, and we need to have a Kyle death match with all the rest of them. 972-PATRIOT if you want to call. Give them KSS to get yourself a free month of service with that promo code. Switch today. Defend freedom with every dollar and every text and every call that you make. patriotmobile.com/KSS. Again, in the show descriptions. Should we get into the goofiness of this? You can't make it up. I was besmirched as a DEI hire at the State Department well before Donald Trump's attacks began. No matter who's president, this lady says, the State Department has long had a problem with inclusion and retention and upward mobility of blacks in their governmental organization. Do you know that there's actually a group in Washington, D.C.? I have absolutely no idea how they get away with this, but there is a group that's called Blacks in Government. I don't know any competent black person that I worked with in the federal government who was a part of this organization. Mostly because they were just doing their job. That's what they did. Like, they just went to work. And they didn't need their skin color to be the armor because their competency spoke for itself. Blacks in government is a thing. This lady is crying about this. Anybody who's ever worked in the federal government can tell you that the number one group of people who are going to have the biggest upward mobility without the skill set to back it up are black women. That's really unfortunate because I'm sure there are some very talented, highly capable, hyper-articulate people with credentials and the skills to back it up, black women. We know that. The world is full of them. You can meet them. There are also a lot of them in government who do not have the skills. They work in the nail room for the Washington field office. They're sitting there 10 hours a day painting nails and wasting time and not doing the function that they're hired to do. I know. I used to work with them. The average black employee or the average employee of the government was a black female between the ages of like 30 and 55, a single mom working on a high school diploma, making more money than made any sense for what she did. And you had to thank her profusely for doing her job in the federal government. I'm not making this up. This just sucks. Everybody has a name for that lady, by the way. I've never met a federal employee out of Washington, D.C. Never. Who couldn't laugh at what I just said right there because they've met that lady and that lady has a different name in every agency. She has a space heater underneath her desk. She has a blanket on her lap. I don't know why they all have it. They just all seem to be issued this crap. They're watching either soap operas or their favorite thing on television, and they're not doing their damn job because it's a jobs program. They don't do work, and they're there for like 43 years. Her name is Ida, right? Her name is Arlene. She's everywhere. Her name is Betty. She just works in the federal government and she doesn't seem to have any function. So to say that there's no upward mobility for black women keep their jobs in the federal government by default without having to actually do it. Maybe that's really troubling for people to hear. It's been my very strong experience, 5 years in Washington, D.C. I saw it everywhere at every government agency I went into, and I worked counterintelligence. So one of the things I did was go into federal government buildings and meet with people, and I'm telling you, they're all over the place. Now, this is the funniest part. The person who wrote this particular article is a woman named Jelena Porter, and she's listed herself as a former senior government spokesperson. She's quite young, as you'll see. She's in her 20s, but she was a senior government spokesperson. Okay, maybe she's very good. Isn't it interesting that she's crying about being a DEI hire when what she did was go out and do diversity seminars all over the country and talk about things like trans and LGBTQ rights? That's what she did. That was her function at the State Department, which I have no idea how that has to do with statecraft. Listen to her. This is the first video that I could find in a Google search. So I went to a left-leaning, friendly venue and found this. This is how she represented herself. This is what she did for a living.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am State Department Principal Deputy Spokesperson Jelena Porter. I'm excited to join you virtually for the Oregon Diversity Career Symposium. State Department employees represent the United States at more than 270 locations all around the world, and we welcome your talent to join the ranks of our dedicated civil and foreign service employees. President Biden's bedrock principle is that diversity is one of our country's greatest strengths. And we know that eliminating inequity, both at home and abroad, is hard to do without pioneers like you. Your views, culture, and identity all contribute to our country's greatest strength.
Nope, none of that. Also, by the way, she's reading off a teleprompter, so she's okay at best, but you can tell that she's reading off a teleprompter, right? That's not extemporaneous thoughts. That is not someone who is sitting there and delivering a message that doesn't feel canned. It feels like it's coming right out of the can. It's being poured in there. Like a cranberry sauce that holds a rigid form, and it's not very comfortable, and you don't want to eat it in that. It doesn't look great. Pretty, well-spoken. I have no idea how many takes it took. Maybe she got it on the first take. Great. Somebody says, is that AI? Yeah, it looks like AI because it is so mechanical. And she's out there crying about this stuff. Like, look, if you're going to spend your time doing it, this entire article is talking about how the State Department is now going to stop the observance of Black History Month. And yeah, they're going to shut down doing Pride Month as well. Do you know why? Because your identity and your views and your culture are completely effing irrelevant to doing a job. I do not care. What I care about is your competency. Do you know how to do the work? Are you able to step up and do the thing that you were hired to freaking do? Because I guarantee you, your cultures, your views, your cultural heritage, none of that is in your job description. I've read federal job descriptions, a bunch of them. I've probably read hundreds of different types of job descriptions. Not one of them says, what is your skin color and how do you feel about it? And have you thought about what you might do with your genitals? Have you thought about smashing them into this type of person or this type of person? If so, you're for us. Nobody cares. Can you do the job? The job is going to have actual things like, can you type? Take messages from one location and synthesize with an analytical focus. Use the following math types of transfers and then send it somewhere else. Can you present data in a coherent format? Brief senior leaders, right? Interview members of the public. Blah, 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 blah. Like there's actual job descriptions. It's crazy. And if you don't believe any of that, if you don't think the government is there simply to affirm your existence, then apparently you are a white supremacist, which doesn't matter if you're actually a white person. It's irrelevant. I found out that Stuart Rhodes is like a quarter Mexican while I was talking to him. You remember the Oath Keepers were all listed as being white supremacists. Anybody who's ever served in the military knows that there's probably some racists in there on both sides, by the way. There's black racists, there's white racists, there's probably some Asian racists. I don't know. Fine. There's also a lot of like inter-race humor because that's pretty funny when you're in places that are dangerous, you're doing really hard work, just like there is on construction and job sites. It's classic. It just happens. But of all the places I've ever seen where meritocracy tends to be important, it's like when your life is on the line, nobody cares what your skin color is. They care whether or not you can pick up the guy that is in front of you who may or may not be bleeding to death and take him somewhere safe so he can get worked on by a medic or a surgical suite, right? Anyway, we need reparations. The government exists in the mind of the leftists to do the things that they want, regardless of how much it costs. Enjoy this one. This is the claim that apparently white supremacy is rampant and the government needs to be doing reparations.
Our government, no matter who is in power, has an obligation to right these wrongs, to provide reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans, to eliminate the racial wealth gap, to uplift the Black community. White supremacy is rampant in this country. Just look at the current administration and our own legislative body. They have contributed to the social and economic harms, to racial terror Black folks have experienced in this country. Now, more than ever, we must acknowledge and repair those harms.
Where was she when Biden was in office, by the way, asking for reparations? Where was she talking about racial terror? How about actual terror? Like where you bring in a bunch of Afghans, you don't know who the hell they are, they decide to go and mow down some people in Germany. We're going to get to that in just a second. And are they going to use the money of the federal government for these reparations? Maybe they could have had that, by the way. But instead, what they were doing is a bunch of shenanigans. Watch this one. This came out of a press conference. I've got a little clip from Real America's Voice. This is a press conference at the White House talking about $2.7, stand by, trillion dollars going missing overseas. Medicare and Medicaid fraud. That's usually for people that don't have money and for people who are old. $2.7 trillion was misused. Listen to this press conference. This is what Doge is uncovering, and apparently it's a real problem.
Brian.
Yes. I want to go back to Doge just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marjorie Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some of this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that Doge is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us. Unfortunately, I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that Doge is working on every single day.
There's other stuff, too. Look, working as an agent near the border in New Mexico, we actually had a case that I was able to shut down the Social Security payments to a man who was in his 80s that had absconded to Mexico after sexually assaulting 3 girls in his neighborhood. The police went there on a warrant to go arrest him. It was like conclusive evidence that this guy was guilty of it. And his family aided him by getting him over the border. And he was still receiving his Social Security checks in Mexico, despite not living in the United States and despite being accused of really serious crimes, which we were able to shut down. He actually had felony prosecution from the United States under what's called UFAP, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. I was able to produce the warrant for that. And then they went and they shut down the payments. But he was getting paid for years out in Otero County. There's all kinds of, that's one little tiny example. There are hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of these things that are out there. Lee Zeldin did a video yesterday that is absolutely mind-numbing because it's not just a concerted effort of people that are fraudsters that are going after weaknesses in the United States government, which there are plenty. There's also people inside the U.S. government that have actively tried to subvert the will of the American people and have been just like playing willy-nilly with not just millions, but billions with a B and apparently trillions with a T dollars of U.S. taxpayer money. The reason why people are pissed, regular people, is because they take money out of their taxes, out of their paycheck every single week. Every single time you get paid, you lose money. And we wonder, what the hell does it go to? Apparently, it goes to crap like this. Like $20 billion being hidden by the EPA so that nobody can touch it. And God forbid they ever shut this thing down, because then the grift is gone. Listen to Lee Zeldin.
Hi, this is EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. One of my very top priorities at EPA is to be an excellent steward of your hard-earned tax dollars. There will be zero tolerance of any waste and abuse. An extremely disturbing video circulated 2 months ago featuring a Biden EPA political appointee talking about how they were tossing gold bars off the Titanic, rushing to get billions of your tax dollars out the door before Inauguration Day. The gold bars were tax dollars, and tossing them off the Titanic meant the Biden administration knew they were wasting it. Following this revelation, during my meetings with members of Congress, I made a very important commitment to them and to the American people, which I reiterated at my confirmation hearing that if confirmed, I would immediately get a full accounting. Fortunately, my awesome team at EPA has found the gold bars. Shockingly, roughly $20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. This scheme was the first of its kind in EPA history and it was purposefully designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight. Even further, this pot of $20 billion was awarded to just 8 entities that were then responsible for doling out your money to NGOs and others at their discretion with far less transparency.
Okay, what he's saying is they wanted to take money that belonged to the American taxpayer that was administered to the EPA, and they wanted to put it out of reach of the government that was going to have a takeover, and Donald Trump was going to come in. They took $20 billion, threw it into an outside financial organization, and then obligated them to a bunch of other stuff, to NGOs, so they could continue this going on. So when Elon Musk, this is a CBS piece here saying, calls for the United States to delete entire agencies at home and mind its own business abroad, it makes perfect sense to regular Americans. We're like, yeah, of course, because the government has shown that it is not a group of people that operate with ethics as they are decrying the loss of. It's a group of people that is run by a bunch of freaking pretenders. People that just make stuff up. Look, the government employees back up this nonsense. Look at this. I'll just show you a video on the side. If you're listening, what you're seeing is people with cups full of fake blood, pouring them on the ground, and then stage dying in front of a Starbucks. If you think government employees are not behind this because they are hard leftists, these are like failed theater kids. They're covered in fake blood. Why is this? Because Donald Trump might end the bloodshed in Gaza. Because he wants to end the war in Ukraine. And he might have to give some concessions because, you know, Russia is stronger than Ukraine. Shocker. Like, what kind of crazy person is laying down? And by the way, what the hell does overburned coffee beans, like a roasting problem, have to do with Gaza? Nothing. They have an enormous fake Starbucks cup full of fake blood, and this lady is laying on the ground here. What a bunch of weirdos. This is why we don't want to have weirdos making stupid decisions about our money. We'd like to have, like, you know, grown-ups who know how to negotiate, figure it out. I'm just leaving that on the screen because it's just too funny. I just watched CNN is like, they are so upset that Donald Trump is willing to have a conversation with the other power in the Ukraine war. The only answer that's acceptable for people in the U.S. government right now has been send unlimited amounts of United States money, our tax dollars, send it over to Ukraine, no questions asked, whether or not it gets there, whether or not it's being used, whether or not there are, you know, millionaires, generals that are spending money on Bugattis or whatever the hell they're spending our money on. We keep hearing that there are aid shipments and weapon shipments that go over to Ukraine. They get turned around and sent on the secondary market. I heard Tucker Carlson talking about it, that it's not questionable. It's a fact that they've seen the receipts on this stuff, that generals are out there flipping this stuff like it's a glorified Craigslist. Like they're buying it, except they're not paying anything because they're getting it from the U.S. government. They're going to turn it around and send it wherever the hell they want. And they're going to make money on it. And they're going to buy a house. Why were there generals' houses from Ukraine in the Palisades fires in Los Angeles? Like, what the hell are they doing? I thought they had a war to win. I thought everybody had to stand up. And a lot of people died in that country. So the idea that Donald Trump would go over to Putin, here's the two article heads from CNN Politics. U.S. relations with Europe will never be the same. It's breathless garbage from Stephen Collinson again. That's his analysis after Trump's call with Vladimir Putin. It gave him a chance to come in from the cold, apparently. Putin goes from pariah to negotiating partner. Yeah, no shit. He's the other guy in the fight. And he has superior resources, a much larger country. And he's the one who, if chosen, has much more nasty, capabilities than Ukraine. They're crying right now because the United States is also sending over Pete Hegseth and Vice President Vance to talk about things like, hey, NATO, you got to pay your fair share. You can't just do whatever the hell you want. And while they're in the middle of this, while they've sent people over to negotiate on behalf of the United States interests, the thing that you kind of elect your president to go do, like negotiate treaties in U.S. interests, things that would benefit us. Boom. This just happened. This was our lead for the thumbnail. At least 20, I'm actually seeing a new report saying as many as 30 are injured after a driver plows into a demonstration in Munich ahead of Vance's meeting with Zelensky. Oh, well, that seems fine. This is coming out of the New York Post. The driver, this is paragraph number 2. God bless the New York Post for actually putting the things up front that we're all wondering. We're like, oh, is it a terrorist event? How many people run a Mini Cooper into 20 to 30 people that are standing in the street that are doing some sort of protest? How common is that? Is that a normal thing that you do? If you're a regular Western person who believes in Western values? Probably not. It's just not a thing that we do. The driver was identified as a 24-year-old Afghan national. Oh, so Is terror being assumed? I see zero mention of it. I'm sure it will come out that this guy was totally westernized, and he was probably going to a Christian church, wasn't he? Or is he a 24-year-old unvetted, moved over because the United States failed withdrawal from Afghanistan? What's more likely? I'm sure we'll find out more. We'll keep an eye on this stuff. Of course, there's a heavy police presence. They're investigating it. Everybody has questions. The questions are assumed when you have an Afghan 24-year-old that the religion of peace is at play here again. Isn't that what we would assume? God forbid. So who is crying? The people that don't want to see the United States pull money away from NATO. NATO, which is not meeting its obligations, which is taking U.S. dollars. As we talked about the other day, $150 million from the United States goes to European nations and then turned around, handed off by the European nations. I saw a member of parliament, one of the British politicians, crying about how his wife had a charity called Turquoise Mountain or something, and they had $1 million more that was owed by U.S. aid because the United States had obligated itself under contract, and the president shut it down. And the question is, well, is this constitutional? It's not okay. And meanwhile, a federal judge is like, yeah, actually, you do have some discretion when you're the federal government, and you do have some discretion as the president on whether or not you can pay it out. Here's Fox News covering some of that.
So clarifying that the government can limit access to federal funds on the basis of the applicable authorizing statutes, regulations, and terms. Essentially, yes, the government can do so in complying with regulations, and then that the previous order does not bar both the president and much of the federal government from exercising their own lawful authorities to withhold funding without the prior approval of the district court, meaning, again, they can disperse the monies that they were allocated within the law, within the confines of the law, and that the government does not have to seek preclearance from the courts on terminating funding as long as they have the authority to do it, as governed by the applicable statutory, regulatory, or grant terms. So essentially, the court is confirming what the Trump administration has maintained and what common sense can project, which is that within the confines of regulatory and normal authority, of course, you can do what you want with your own money. And you
On top of that, it turns out that the president is actually charged with making treaties and agreements and negotiating with other countries. And so he's doing that. God forbid it be Vladimir Putin. And so everything is going to be cast as a Russia, Russia, Russia. It is on ABC, NBC, CBS, and all the others. They have all covered down on the same story, that it's atrocious that he would even talk to the guy on the other team. Because I guess they want the war to continue. It sounds like they needed that war to open up so the money could get moved around. And they're very upset about it. I've got a great little clip of Chuck Schumer. For whatever it's worth, I went looking for what he refers to as a meat axe. I looked on Amazon. There's some really cool meat axes out there. There are. I would like a meat axe. If any of you know where to find an appropriate meat axe that you can use to both cut government spending, but also maybe cut actual meat, I would be interested. So make sure you guys give me a link, send it to me in DMs, post it on social media. If you find a picture of a cool and affordable and maybe American-made meat axe, we would like one. I would very much enjoy it. I may have to talk to my buddies over at Shield Arms into making me a meat axe. They're making knives as well. I'll talk about them in just a second. Here's Chuck Schumer. He's decrying, yeah, you can cut spending. We know government's inefficient, but it needs to be inefficient to a certain level. You can't just cut it broad spectrum with a meat axe.
The bottom line is simple. Everyone knows there's waste in government and should be cut, but DOGE is using a meat axe, and they're cutting things that are efficient and effective. I was in Albany and Syracuse on Monday talking at community health centers. Many of them have had their funds cut temporarily. Some even hasn't been restored yet. And they're the most efficient healthcare providers around. Take AID. Maybe there's some programs they don't like. But most people agree that PEPFAR was extremely effective and cost effective. Most people would want to see us continue our fight in Central Africa against Ebola so it doesn't come here. And so the bottom line is very simple. Okay? If you want to make cuts, then you do it through a debate in Congress, not lawlessly by just implementing it.
I disagree. I don't know. I don't actually care about Ebola in Central Africa. It's completely irrelevant to me. Has nothing to do with why I pay my taxes. Nothing about the Kyle Seraphin, the tax bill that I have should be allocated over to something in Africa without us having, like, elected representatives that have some sort of say. What if they had to come to their constituents and be like, by the way, I'm running on taking money from you and sending it over to some third party through an NGO, which is going to go to a governmental organization that is going to stop Ebola in Africa because it's dangerously near coming to the United States. I'll be like, No, that's not real. Use the meat axe every day, please. Meat axe. Speaking of axes, speaking of knives, there's my buddies over at Shield Arms. If you guys want to support the program and you want to check into an outstanding weapons company who also makes knives, including a beautiful kitchen knife. It's not cheap, but it is made in America. It's made in Montana. It's shieldarms.com. Check out their other goods, and you can go to their knife section. They have like some survival knives. They've got some kitchen knives as well. We should get one of those. I would want to display it on my wall, but I'd also want to cut my meat with it. Shieldarms.com. The promo code KYLE will save you 5% on knives if you want to go buy those. If you're looking for something that is cool that nobody else has, they've got like G10 burlapped wrapped enamel handles and things like that. They've got wood grain. They've got other kind of stuff. Check them out. Cool people making cool products in America, you know, not in Africa. They're not interested in Ebola. They're not interested in sending your money overseas. They're a Montana-based manufacturing company on the, east side of the Flathead Lake, up in near Kalispell, Montana. Shieldarms.com, promo code KYLE. Again, KYLE. Save yourself between 5 and 10% across the board, including on their firearms, which are outstanding and something that I carry. Basically, there's accessories and or complete firearms every single day. What else would the government? He just said, I just heard Chucky Schumer say that the government generally uses pretty efficient means, don't they? Let me show you what people think the government should be doing on the hard left. These are, I don't know, like the craziest people in the world. This is in Worcester, Massachusetts. It's a suburb of Boston. They think the federal government's job is to defend their lives as transgender people. Look, this is just an argument for the insane asylums. I would actually get behind federal government money for asylums at this point, because there's too many of these people.
I need the city to protect me because the federal government won't. And if you think you're afraid of Trump, you should see how afraid of Trump I am.
And she has pearls on, like huge pearls.
Yes, I can.
And clown makeup.
You say that you're afraid of Trump, and that's why you don't want the city to be a safe space for trans people. You better prepare for trans people to make this a very unsafe space.
Unsafe. I'm shaking right now.
Stop shaking.
I don't want to be here. I'm sorry. Am I taking too long pleading for my life?
Yes, sir.
You remembered how many children I have and that 2 of them are trans.
Ma'am, this is a Wendy's.
I speak as both the B and the T in the LGBT.
This guy looks like Buffalo Bill from the...
I'm multiply disabled. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder that causes me immense physical pain. I'm on the autism spectrum.
Of course.
And I have narcolepsy, and I couldn't drive myself here, so I had to hide from my...
I'm just going to turn down the volume on these people for a second because she has narcolepsy, and I'm hoping that at any moment she might actually fall asleep while talking. This is a woman dressed as, I think, like Guy Farage or whatever that guy's name is. That's not Guy Farage. What's the guy's name? Fieri? The weird frosted tip dude that does the cooking shows, that likes the really hot stuff, the kind of chubby dude with the chin beard. In any case, just a bunch of crazy people who think that the federal government money should be spent to save, I don't know, transgender people in Worcester, Massachusetts. I talk to George all the time. George Hill, friend of the show, FBI whistleblower. And unfortunately, he lives part-time in Massachusetts near Boston. And every time I'm just like, I see these clips, I just think, imagine George meeting these clowns. It's just so weird. This is what they think we should spend money on, is protecting weirdos, absolute, completely bizarre people that you would take your children and put them in the car and you would leave the park if they were out there, men wearing women's clothing and other kind of freakish things. It's not what I want to spend my dollars on. I just don't care. I'll tell you, the thing is, there is a ton of waste. There is a ton of abuse. How about this? This is maybe the funniest, most ironic story of the week. The inspectors general, these are the people that were working for various different offices of the inspector general in various different parts of the federal government, as many as 17 of them, were fired. And they filed a lawsuit to get their jobs back. 8 of them have claimed that Donald Trump broke the law when he attempted to terminate them. Can I tell you why I think this is so funny? Because it really is amusing to me. I went to the inspector general's office for DOJ. So did Garrett O'Boyle. So did Steve Friend. They're coming up on the American Radicals podcast. You guys can find them at AMRAD Pod. We'll dump into there from Rumble. If you stay here, I'll send you right over. The craziest thing is that the Inspector General does nothing to help out people, which they are an authorized whistleblower channel where you can report, just wait for it, fraud, waste, and abuse. Things that are problematic to people who are in government that say, hey, this is not efficient. This is not in compliance with ethics. People are violating rule, policy, or law. I'd like to tell somebody like the Inspector General. And the Inspector General does nothing. They ignore you. In fact, we found out that it is DOJ inspector policy that the most common thing to do is to deny an investigation into everyone because they are required by law to respond in like 60 days. So they just respond with, we're not going to do anything. And by responding not anything, they can later go back and reopen that if they think it's useful or if there's some political expedience. And then they write a strongly worded letter. They have zero legal authority. They never can prosecute, especially in DOJ. What they'll do is they'll just let people know that something happened, but we're not going to tell you who it is. And that person left the government because they were able to resign. When we started asking them questions, they just left with their pension. So they're crying about losing their jobs. This is Robert Storch. I guess he was the IG over at NSA and then at the DOD. He was fired. He's crying about it. He said he was so proud and honored. Welcome to the whistleblower experience, bro. You're not going to get your job back. I hope it takes you 10 years and that you basically don't have any time left in your eligibility for age.
So I was, as you say, honored to be nominated by President Trump to be the first presidentially appointed Inspector General of the National Security Agency. I served in that position almost 5 years. I was honored to be nominated by President Biden to be the Inspector General for the entire Department of Defense and confirmed on a very bipartisan basis for that important position, and honored to work with the women and men of that office doing oversight over the entire Department of Defense.
So you're just at home on a Friday night, though, after that, and you find out that you are being fired?
Yeah, actually, you hear the remnants. I had this respiratory thing, and I was home and not feeling so great, though I'd worked all day from home, and got a call from one of my colleagues asking if I'd been fired. I didn't know what he was talking about. I checked my email and got back on the phone and said, yeah, it looks like I've been fired.
Oh, my God, you were fired. And you were working from home? Oh, my goodness. How did you do your job if you were from home, if you were working in the Inspector General's office, which is supposed to deal with all kinds of sensitive stuff? Sounds like he's been crying, doesn't it? Yeah. And of course, CNN is there to carry the water. 100%. Like, we got to do it. Things are just happening. They're moving forward. Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed yesterday, sworn into the DNI, apparently flew over to Europe to get involved in that. So she is moving things along. We're getting people that I didn't expect. Pete Hegseth was supposed to be a bigger fight. Tulsi Gabbard, I thought, was going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight. It sounds like we might get the cabinet that Donald Trump asked for. Are they all my favorite picks? No. Are they your favorite picks? Probably not. RFK Jr., now out of committee and heading in for maybe a today or maybe later on in the end of this week. Kash Patel being debated right now. It's getting there. We're seeing movement. We're seeing a lot of crying. We're also seeing a ton of resistance. Let me close with a little bit of the resistance that's going on. The things that, the Inspector General should be doing, we're having to leave it to the DOJ to go through and do right now, and the FCC. By the way, this article about the FCC, it is, hold on, let me read the actual title. Trump's FCC chair goes after Soros-linked radio stations for reporting on ICE raid details. So it's Trump's fault. Meanwhile, San Francisco radio station KCBS, a former employee, I was a former employee there. I worked there when I got out of college. My father ran the news department there when I was born. My connections to KCBS go back. It was the first microphone I was ever in front of was in a KCBS studio. And KCBS, breaking with all tradition for all time, has decided to advocate on behalf of illegal aliens in the Bay Area. That's how far and captured that newsroom is. I asked my dad about it because I was curious. I was like, Dad, did you guys ever report on ongoing government operations that were happening in real time? And he was like, no. We would never think to do that because it actually endangers the people doing the work. I've got some information and I haven't been able to validate it yet, but let me just share it with you. Consider this with a grain of salt. The source is unvetted by me, but it sounds reasonable from what I've heard. Apparently in Denver, Colorado, ICE went to go execute some of their raids on illegal aliens to round up criminal gang members and so on. And they were being paired up with FBI agents to increase and bulk up their manpower. This is a thing that is going on right now. Pam Bondi has talked about it as well. And interestingly enough, those agents all got simultaneous text messages. I have to imagine that they're all probably on a group chat from their squad. They got a text message, likely from a supervisor, that said, you are no longer allowed to participate in this raid or you are allowed to opt out. And all of the agents from the FBI asked to have the ICE agents pull over, got out of the cars and did not participate, which endangers the number of people that were supposed to be involved in the manpower of that arrest. Really freaking wild. And on top of that, we've been hearing about leaks. So let me just throw you a little clip of Pam Bondi saying that this is a different kind of DOJ. She said that a few times. They're suing New York. Here she is saying, if you leak information to people who are enemies and put Leo's lives in danger, you're going to face criminal prosecution. This must happen. It has to happen.
If anyone leaks anything, people don't understand that jeopardizes the lives of our great men and women in law enforcement. And if you leaked it, we will find out who you are and we will come after you. And it's not going to stop our mission. It's not going to stop the president's mission to make America safe again. We were very clear with the lawsuit that we filed in Chicago that if you don't follow the law, you will be prosecuted by the Department of Justice.
Seems really straightforward. This is the thing. I cannot fathom that anybody would think this would be okay. Also, what's more fun than getting to jump in the car with the ICE agents, not having to do the paperwork, not having to write the op order, jock up with your gear, and go grab a bad guy that needs to leave the country? It's like the easiest thing. It's the most fun thing to do. When my team got to do surveillance and to arrest, and we went after MS-13 gangbangers, it was great. It's like somebody else wrote up all the plans. We came up with our own way of executing it. We'd go out and do it. You wake up early, you get to hang out with your buddies, you drink coffee, and you go do the mish. And you don't really get to do the mish when you're in law enforcement because you're not, a military operator. But when you get to like jock up as a federal agent and do the job that you thought you were going to do all the time based on the training you get in Quantico and Hogan's Alley and all that stuff, that's what you sign up for. If you don't want to get out the door and you want to sit behind we used to say the suits and salad crowd, they wear ankle holsters because they've never had to shoot out of it. They like to sit at their desk and they like to tell people they're a federal agent. That's why I call the FBI federal law enforcement cosplay. If you're part of that, get the hell out. There's got to be a better agency for that. Take their badge, take their guns, or give them the badge. I don't care. And let them do something else. In any case, one thing that I did have a little thing on that I always hated about the Bureau was shitty training. There's no other way to say it. There's a funny little palate cleanse we're going to have where we're going to go that way. Before we do, let me just remind you guys, you can follow the show. If you want to see it live, you want to be part of the best chat on the internet, it's rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. As always, you can see us on X if you can't find us on Rumble. If you want to see things afterwards, you want to join the community, KyleSeraphin.com for our locals. And for all of you that want to see it without any ads after the fact, you're like, hey, it's too much, Spotify, just bookmark it. You guys can go find it over there. That's where we're hosting right now. We'd really appreciate more followers and subscribers and 5-star reviews over on Spotify. And thanks for those of you that leave comments. I get funny ones and I get dumb ones. I read all of them. They're good. I'll respond to some of you when I have the time. All right, let's do something funny. One of the worst things that happened in government was virtual academy or virtual trainings, computer-based training garbage. And they're almost all universally bad. Some of them are stupid woke. They're almost always written by people that do not actually do the job for a living. They just write trainings and they're terrible. So today's palate cleanse is funny for a couple of reasons. Number one, the reverse psychology of it. This is one of our favorite guys who does like military stuff. The second thing is this was on Elon Musk's feed. So he actually saw this video and may actually look into it for Doge, which would be amazing. Lastly, a little personal thing. When I was left at the FBI without pay for like 4 months or 3 months, whatever it was, January through March of 2022, I got an email during that time, being unpaid, by the way. They removed me and called me AWOL. My boss told me that my virtual academy was not stacked up correctly and that I was actually dinging the chief office or the Albuquerque field office's metrics. And so they asked me to do my virtual academy from my phone. And I said I was disinclined to acquiesce to their request, sort of Pirates of the Caribbean style. And my first day back, they told me to do virtual academy and catch up. So this is a real thing. Anyway, for those of you who know, you know, here's a little message to Elon Musk.
Elon, you can't just call anything you want waste and just get rid of it. You can't do that. Like in the Department of Defense, we do like lots and lots of online training every year that's totally not a waste of time and teaches us great skills that we use every day. And you should not use Doge to eliminate that. You just don't, please don't do that. Please.
Don't eliminate it. And of course, like I said, it was in Elon Musk's feed because he saw it and he said, how much time is spent with computer learning? It's like, oh my God, so much. So much. Anyway, hopefully the winning continues. We look forward to doing a Friendly Friday tomorrow. If you guys want to catch a little bit more of Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle, who was on earlier this week, you can find them on the AMRAD podcast. You can find them at AMRAD Pod on X. You can find them over on Rumble right now as we're going to go raid their chat. And thanks to all of you for joining our program. God bless you. I look forward to seeing you again in the morning. Have a great Thursday. Let's do this.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.